So we're back with hour 3. Our search right now isn't done. You know, I can load my games, but as soon as I search, you know, I'm getting the right number of conditions, but we haven't populated any values into those parameters. We also haven't added our wildcard characters yet. So inside of our loop, there's a couple ways. I'm going to try it a little differently from the way I planned it. So we want to do a couple of things. What we want to do is, as we're looping through, we want to take our array and we want to append it. We want to put those wildcard characters around each word because we need those wildcard characters so our search can use like and not equals. So what I'm going to do here for each, as we're looping through, we're building our where clause. So this part's fine. But we're also going to we want to change, and I'm not sure, actually, I probably need square brackets for this. Sorry. What we want to do as we're looping through, we want to convert that word that's our current element in our array. We want to add % signs to it. Put a wildcard character both before and after that word. So as we're looping through, we're actually changing all the values in our array, right? We're putting wildcard characters around each value. So we're not going to use a bind param statement. You know, all we have are these question marks. We now need to inject this array into our list of parameters. So normally we use bind param. We're going to do that a little differently. Here in our execute, we've never passed in a parameter here, but notice my code editor says, oh, hey, yeah, you can pass in input parameters here. So what we want to do is pass in our entire word list array as a parameter. And because we have the same number of question marks, we have one question mark for every element in our array, PDO is smart enough to match them up. So in here, our parameters is simply our word list array that now also includes those wildcard characters. We may have to tweak this a little bit. I'm not sure whether it's going to allow us to modify the loop as we're going, the array as we're going through it. If not, we'll just make a duplicate array and we'll push the contents there. So let's try this and see what happens. So the only things we've added before we increment our counter is we're adding the wildcard characters, and when we call execute, we're passing in this entire array as a parameter to our execute. Let's see what happens. I just need to initialize. I'm not working on the server. When I do it the first time, my word list array is blank, so I need to initialize it. So I am just going, you won't need to do this if you're running it on DreamHost. I'll say word list. We'll see if that fixes it. I'm not sure if I have to initialize it to null or to an array. Okay, so my.
Show again, where did you execute? What line?
So I initialized it up at the top. So I just added this to the execution. What does what mean?
Execute into the array list.
It means pass the array list as a parameter of execute. So my execute, we've set up all these parameters with question marks. So it fills each question mark with the next element in the array. So let's try searching now for one keyword. If I search of, I get any game that has of anywhere in there. If I search both, I should get any game that has either Fallout or of anywhere in the title, which I do. We can also hide this in a minute. We don't need to be, that was just for debugging purposes. So using that execute with an array of parameters, there's sort of a little bit of magic there. We set up, so 2 keywords gives us 2 parameters. We have an array with 2 elements in it, and PDO is smart enough, it just, when we pass that array, the first element goes into the first parameter. The second element goes into the second parameter, and so on. So now we can pass in a dynamic number of parameters this way. So we're almost there. So this part's new. Using the explode function is new. And using this question mark to represent a parameter that we're not giving a name to. So we've been using named parameters all along, right? With a colon, we give a descriptive name. These are kind of like anonymous parameters that don't have a specific name. So the last thing we want to do is add a little drop-down list and change this so it becomes a variable. It might say or, it might say and, depending on what the user chooses. So let's go back up to our form, which I can leave this code here for a minute. So the only things we added after the break was line 53, and we added this parameter to line 66.
This time you didn't use the button. You didn't use the bind.
I know, this is a substitute for using bind. When you pass in the list of parameters to execute, it's the same as doing a bind. It does the same thing. The difference is we couldn't use bind in this example because when we use bind, we have to give every parameter a name and we have to know how many parameters we have. In this case, we don't know how many parameters we need. So this allows us to do it dynamically where the parameters aren't given names and the number of parameters can vary. So this is the equivalent of doing bind. Because normally when we do bind, there's nothing here, right? We just call execute with no parameter here. We run all the bind statements in between here. We call prepare, we bind each parameter one at a time, and then we execute.
We use this how we check the length of the length of whether it has a number or just a string.
Yeah, it doesn't do the type. It doesn't give us, that is the one thing we don't have. We don't have the type checking of calling bind parameter. So that is one thing we don't have, but we can't name them because we just don't know how many parameters we have in this case. But yes, it doesn't offer the same type checking that bind param does.
What is the second execute to populate the table?
There isn't a second execute. This is the only one. That runs the query. We've just modified. So last week it was like this.
Yeah.
So there's only one execute. So if we haven't done a search, we've just clicked view games. This is empty, so no parameters are passed. It just runs our base statement, select star from games, right? All of this stuff gets ignored. And then we just put on an order by at the end. So there are no parameters in that case when I just click my navigation bar and go to view games. So we want add a little drop down here with two options, one that says any keyword, the other option says all keyword, and the values will be or and. Then we can pass that value to our form and use that variable as a variable to know what kind of search we're doing. So after my input, I'm going to go up to the top where my form is, but before my button, we'll add a select. I'll give it a name of search type. And we're just going to hard code the values. They don't have to come from the database. There's only two choices. Any keyword, all keywords. So we haven't used this attribute yet, a value. My first choice is going to say any keyword. If the user picked any keyword, what value should we pass to our query? They say any keyword at all. Yeah, our value will be or. And then we'll put in a second option. The text that will be displayed says all keywords. What should the value be? Yeah, in that case, the value is going to be and. So now we can evaluate our search type, and then we'll know whether our queries should use or whether it should use and. So those 4 lines are all we need in the HTML part. If I save this, it should generate a drop-down list after my keyword box, but before my search button. So that's what I want. So if I pick something, well, whenever I run a search now, let's try this again. So if I leave the default, which says, sorry, if I pick any, notice my URL now. It's got my keywords and it also now has the search type. So we can pull that value with get as well. If I pick all keywords, I still have the same keywords in the URL, but now my search type says and. So we can just like we pulled the keywords out of the URL with get, we can now pull the search type out of the URL with get. So we're going to want to look for a variable called get search type. So if we have keywords, right, we can ignore this part if there's no keywords. If the user isn't searching, we can ignore this completely. So this now, rather than hard coding the word or, this has to become a variable. So we can set up a search type variable. Check or. So this will tell us what the user picked in the drop-down list. And those the only 2 possible values are and or. So now we just have to make one last change. What line are we going to modify? What line number and what change are we going to make there? And then we should be done. So 56, and what do we want to do here? So instead of hard coding the word or, we're going to inject our search type variable instead. We'll have a value of or a value of and. That should be it. Because it's part of our SQL, right? We're injecting that variable into our SQL because it has to come before name like, right? Name like this or name like that. So now let's try it. If I search of and Fallout, if I say any keyword, I get those 6 records. Every one of them has one of those keywords. How many records should I get now? 0. There are no games that have both of those words. So when I say all, I get nothing. Let me add a game. Try it this way. I'm going to add one more game. If I search any one of these, I get all of those. If I search all, how many records am I going to get? 1 or 0?
1.
Right? Because we're searching for each word individually. It doesn't matter what order they're in. We're not searching for one term. We're searching each word if it's found anywhere. So it's like this and like this and like this.
And it's not case sensitive.
It is not case sensitive. Good point. Right? And most searches aren't case sensitive because we don't know how someone has stored things in their database.
So the default is not case.
Right. By default, the SQL values are not case sensitive. So we can get rid of this. We don't need to print out this to the screen anymore. That was just for debugging. So I'm going to comment out my little echo command here. Yeah, I can type it all in lowercase, even though all of the Fallouts start with a capital F. Doesn't matter. And now we can sort on the search results as well, because our little sortable.js, it still works.
When I try to search without entering anything, it says violation error.
Ah, okay. So we hit search. Okay, we must have something different in here because I can do it and I just get them all.
You show the HTML code name that for this keyword.
Which part do you want to see?
The select all.
There.
Here.
This is the most complicated thing we're going to do with this application. It is a little bit advanced.
You want to see that in our assignment too?
Nope, not required. Not required in assignment 2. Okay. Certainly you're welcome to use it if you want to add it, but it's not a requirement and there's no marks for implementing it.
You have bonus.
Yeah, bonus for things I have not taught you. This wouldn't qualify. One other thing, I made a number of comments to a number of you. You don't have to get carried away, but you do need to change the look and feel of the application a little bit. It shouldn't be an exact copy of the one we're doing in class. Okay, the idea is you have 2 websites that you can show an employer that you've built with PHP and MySQL. They should look different. They shouldn't be exact copies, okay? It's pretty easy to customize. You can either add your own CSS or play around with using some of the other classes that Bootstrap offers. So your forms aren't, your 2 sites aren't identical copies of each other, okay? So there's our search, there's our sorting. I will put today's code on GitHub. A couple of people asked, well, where is the link to the code? There's probably no point. All you need to do is go to my GitHub homepage and you can find the repositories. There's really no point in me posting the links every single week. It's right here. In Weekly Learning, here's the link to my main GitHub page. So just click that. The repositories are always going to be named descriptively, right? It's going to have our course code, the lesson number, and Monday. You know that's our files. Okay, so you can always look there. Okay, I'm going to stop my recording for this week.